Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in a prior video I was looking at my Ruger 10/22 and I said to all of you I have some good news and some bad news. And the good news was I was putting a ton of rounds down range, getting a lot of range time and just enjoying my firearms. But the bad news, well, everything is dirty. Literally all of my firearms with the exception of that 10/22 because I have now since cleaned it. But today, the Ruger PC Carbine. Again, this is dirty. I have to clean it. It is time. And on top of that, I have some projects coming up for this, which I'm really excited about. So today, what we're going to do, we're going to get into this in a little bit of detail. I'm going to do a basic disassembly. Today is going to be a basic cleaning, pretty much like a field strip and getting this back and ready for service. Now, this will be a disassembly without the full reassembly. I'll get you close, but I'm not going to fully reassemble this for a particular reason. And that being because, as I mentioned, I do have a project coming up where, quite frankly, I need this disassembled. So when we get back, a basic disassembly, a basic cleaning, pretty much like I said, a field strip. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now again, my Ruger PC Carbine. Now keep in mind as I get into this, this has 500 rounds through it. Exactly 500 rounds from me through this. I bought it brand new, and at this point I would say I'm pretty much into the break-in period, which is awesome. So we'll get a little bit of an example of what 500 rounds of dirtiness looks like. Now keep in mind the fact that this model is of course a takedown model, and it has the hand guard, which is a little bit different than some of the other models. So in other words, you have the M-LOK hand guard. So disassembly of this particular firearm might be a little bit different than other models. But with that, let's spin the camera around and we'll get into it. Now, a couple other details that I do want to discuss. I'm not going to get into what it's like to disassemble, all of my accessories. Everybody's going to have their own accessories, so to each their own on that. But one thing that I do want to mention is that I've watched a number of disassembly and reassembly and cleaning videos on the Ruger PC Carbine for a couple of reasons. The main reason being I was looking for a very specific value. I want to see torque values on some of these screws. And so far, I don't really see any that talk about it. So what I'm going to do is get all the basic accessories off of here. I'm not going to bore you with that. But then what we're going to do is I'm going to get my torque wrench. And we're going to actually reverse take these off. Like I'm going to take the torque wrench and dial it way down, and then we're going to go in reverse to figure out what the values are so that we have a means to go by when we put everything back together. Now, I'm not going to say that you necessarily have to have everything perfectly torqued, but what I can definitely say is that can matter and will matter when you put this through the paces. And I don't want things loosening up. I don't want to have inaccuracies because of my, quote unquote gunsmithing. I'd rather just know the values and put this right back to what it came from the factory. So assuming things haven't really loosened up, I should be able to get those values, and at least you'll see them here today. All right, so I have everything that I need here. I have this pretty much back to the original factory setup. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the charging handle, which here you can see there's just a bolt down on the inside. Now, as we get on this here, this does require a 5/32 hex bit. So you can see here at this point reaching down inside. Now, what I mentioned is I really do want to try to figure out what some of the torque values are just for the experiment. Now, not to say that this is critical in this particular case, but I do want to sort of figure things out just for the documentation perspective. So here I have a 5/32 bit. I have this set to peak so that as I back this off, as soon as the bolt sort of cracks, it should track where I'm at. So as we get on this here, I'm basically going to rock this back. So you can see here, this is peeking out. I mean, that's 43, 44, 45. I mean, that's just climbing up. So this thing is cranked. So whoever put this on literally gorillaed this thing on here to the point where, I mean, I'm already at 60 inch-pounds and it hasn't even budged. So that's pretty tight, which at this point, there we go. And so in other words, that probably doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot when you go to put this back on, because it does not take a lot to hold this in place. And having 60 on there, yeah, that's a lot. Now, something worth considering before I remove the handle, you do need to separate the two halves, which really does, at this point, require me to hold the bolt back. So you'll see there, once I do that, no problem. And now I can remove the handle. Handle being in the forward position, so closing the bolt. And at this point, this can come off. So if you notice here, it's got this little piece on the bottom, which is integral to the handle. And then, of course, you end up with the screw. So just being careful here to keep this all together, but pretty straightforward. And again, this pretty much has to be removed after you remove the fore end. And then once you get the bolt forward and in the closed position. But now the next thing is getting the trigger assembly out. And again, this is another place where I'm curious about the torque value. So again, I need a 5/32 bit. And as we get this in here and rocking this back, that's 18.59 right there. About 32, and that broke. So that's telling me about 32.13. Clearing that out, going to the front. Now I took a little bit of pressure off this, but there we go. Again, 32.84. So this is saying around 32 for each of these. That seems pretty tight to me. That's much more than on my 1022. I want to say on that, I'm only using like 18. So almost double. Now keep in mind, Ruger does actually have some decent instructions. And as you take a look here, it actually says those takedown screws were supposed to be 65 inch-pounds. So that is something to consider when this goes back together. So I don't feel like I had a full 65 inch-pounds on mine. That feels like a lot. 65 is a good amount, but I'm always willing to go by what the factory says, so that is definitely something to consider. These are what are called captured screws, so basically these do not need to come all the way out. However, I will remove these because I do have a project, but for the most part, I'm going to center my lock here. Again, very similar to the 1022, so the safety, you can see. And that will slide right out. So your bolt group with the trigger group coming right out of the actual stock. So for me, again, I am going to remove these bolts because I have a project that requires this thing to be completely naked, which I will do. And these thread out nicely. So very simple. This here is the mag well. This is the factory Ruger mag well. So that's in place there. You can see definitely getting some gunk and debris and gunpowder buildup. Simply pressing the magazine release and pulling this out of the way. So this should go right back and in with ease, no problem. And it's hard to say, I may get some Glock magazines for this, which would obviously allow me to swap this out for the Glock magazine well adapter. As we take a look at the inside, very dirty and dingy. That's something to consider. Look how much gunk and grime is in there. This needs to be completely cleaned out. Not that it's, you know, a crazy wear point, but any gunk and debris and buildup you have, just an indication that this is a good area to pay attention to and clean. And then on top of that, when you take a look at the mag well itself, again, very dirty and dingy, lots of gunk and grime. It almost feels like sand, but very, very dirty. To get the trigger group out of the receiver, you can see this pin here is already starting to sort of drift itself out. So these pins here should be pretty straightforward. If you've ever worked on a 1022, this is going to be very similar. You can see these pins coming right out, very simple. And the trigger assembly literally just sliding right out, no problem. So very easy. This just literally comes right out of place. So now we should be able to grab onto the buffer spring, which I think, as long as we slide this out carefully, this should come right out, which it does. And setting this down and sliding this up towards the back here, that comes right out. And this whole assembly comes out with ease. So pretty straightforward there. And this is, for the most part, about how far I'm going to take the receiver down. And so in essence, an easy cleanup of the trigger assembly. That shouldn't be a problem. And then my bolt group here, as long as I'm careful, quick little cleanup. Looking for some little wear points. I might put a little light, daub of grease, clean up all the faces, make sure everything is nice and in place. This can come apart further, but I'm not necessarily going to do that. We'll see. It just depends how far I get and really what this looks like, but we're going to leave it like this for now. And then cleaning all inside here. Again, just some kind of rough debris in there, getting everything nice and smooth and cleaned up. Again, looking for wear points, adding a little bit of grease in strategic locations, just a little bit, and then CLP, cleaning everything up. That will be fine. This here is the magazine release. I need to get this off of the stock again so that I can do my little project. I'm just going to check this. They say it's around 15 inch-pounds of torque. So as I back this off, that cracked at 5.22. So interesting that this comes to me far less torqued up than what their recommended values are in their own manual. But as we remove the screw, you'll see it did have red Loctite on it, so a little red Loctite. And then underneath here, the spring. So the spring basically goes right inside. Here's your sort of reverse side. Now take a look at the fact, again, this is just covered in debris. That all needs to be cleaned up. Now, so I don't lose anything, and I'm very, very careful here, I'll deal with this afterwards, but I'm basically just going to put all of this back together so I can't accidentally lose any of my critical pieces. Putting this together for the time being, but you can see what that's supposed to look like as you get it mounted back into the stock. And keep in mind the fact that it is a reversible mag release. So depending on which side you prefer it to be on, you can reverse it. Now my button for me is on the left-hand side, so that's how that's going to operate. Pretty straightforward. Now for me, I'm also going to disassemble the rear end here so you can see my, the butt of the stock. This has an adapter so that I can, put on a sling. So I'm just going to get on these screws in the back here, has hex heads, and then pull all of this off, put it aside, and store it for later. Which, from what I can tell, needs a 9/64 inch hex key. So you can see here, this little hex wrench getting on there. Yep, no problem. So that does seem to be about right. Loosening everything up nicely, which at this point here you can see very simple. So no problem there. Extremely easy. And this stock is now completely prepared for my project. So this section, apart from cleaning it up, is ready to go. Now for the barrel, in order to get the hand guard off, I do have to remove the front sight. And they're saying a T10 should about do it. So again, as I go through this, just talking about the torque values, let's check this out real quick and see what we get. I'm kind of curious. So turning this on, setting it to peak. It's pretty stiff. And there we go. 24.34. About the same. So So that should be enough to get the front sights off here. Sliding these out from in front of the handguard, and there you go. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a 1/8 bit that fits my torque wrench right now. I should, but I don't seem to have it readily available. So in terms of how tight is this, I mean, this handguard does not feel terribly tight, but you do need that 1/8 wrench to get this off. So again, just backing this off, and as we take a look at the actual bolt itself, no indication of any thread lock or anything like that. So that's probably not incredibly critical, but it is just something worth noting, I guess, at this point, that it does not take a huge amount of effort. So as I get this on here, and this one does seem to be a little bit tighter. And as I try to take this off, yeah, you can see, I mean, that was seemingly torqued. So it is something that I'll probably try to pay attention to. I don't see a torque value in the actual manual, but again, just something that is worth considering. This one actually does have a little bit of red thread lock, so keep that in mind. And now with the bolts removed, this comes out. So I'm just going to go easy here. Try not to scratch everything up. And this assembly here I will clean, and then it will get set aside. But my handguard is part of my project. So at this point, this needs to be really cleaned up very well. And again, set aside. This will be part of the upcoming project. So now as we get into the cleaning, the first thing is I started gathering up all these little granules because I assumed these are unspent gunpowder, which it appears as though they are because I piled everything up and, well, they made a nice little flash. So why is there unspent gunpowder accumulating inside my rifle? I honestly have no way of knowing if that's normal or if that's just crappy ammo or what the deal is, but I gotta get a compressor and blow all of this out. So that's the first thing. And when it comes down to how you actually clean your firearms, there's a ton of different ways to approach it, ton of different products, and this is just what works for me. I tend to use Breakthrough Clean, and I tend to start with solvent, and then I work my way to CLP. So first thing with the barrel, I'm gonna get some of the solvent inside here. So just gonna work that down. Let that run down to the bottom. Now that it's dripping, just gonna let that sit. Now in terms of the stock itself, taking a look here, this is really, really dirty. I mean, surprising how dirty this really is. Breakthrough Clean solvent is pretty safe on polymers, so I'm not worried about it. Basically at this point, I do see these heavy caked on areas, so I'm just gonna get this all worked inside here. Let it sit just for a second. Again, I really want to do a good job cleaning this up because this stock will be part of a project, which I am really looking forward to. I think it will be fun. You'll see it in a later video, but just going to scrub this up. And now I am using a nylon brush for this because it's not going to be terribly abrasive. Just kind of scrubbing everything down. And then I'll get my patches on the inside, kind of continue to break things up and wipe it out. But I'm surprised at how dirty the actual inside of the stock here does get. Pretty dirty, pretty grimy. Like I said, it looks like unspent gunpowder, and then certainly a lot of debris and smoke and buildup, which has now accumulated. And as you take a look at what happens with the patch so far, you can see how much black is going to accumulate on here. So it will take a little bit to get this fully cleaned up, and then I do actually have to degrease this at a later time. So right now is cleaning, and then in my next project I will be degreasing as well. So this will get cleaned up and literally put aside tonight. So just sparing you watching me go through this whole thing, basically all I did was really go to town, clean up the degreaser, get it out of there, and really get into all the grooves with my patches, make sure that it was really super clean as best as I could. And then again, this will be degreased. Now, in order for me to get in all the grooves, I leveraged a little nylon pick. These are fantastic, and it did exactly what I needed. Literally just taking my patch, putting it over the nylon pick, and then running it through the grooves. So very easy technique, and does a nice job getting into those crevices. Which now at this point, we can start working on the barrel. So I kind of just leave some of these semi-dirty patches around because they're still more than plenty useful. Now, this thing has been sitting here leaking, which is not a bad deal. I have more than enough solvent inside here. However, quick little spritz here. Now I have a big long bore brush, which you might need for a longer rifle barrel. Of course, I have the takedown, so at this point, it's not quite as needed to be this long, but we'll get the patch on here, and we'll just get this thing going. So I really pretty much only like to run these in one direction. It probably doesn't matter. Might be a little bit anal about this, but this is kind of my zen time anyway, so who cares how long this takes me. It's going to take a couple passes. Very simple. Transitioning now to a nylon brush. I don't often use brass if I can avoid it. I feel like why go heavy duty if you don't need it? But again, just get a little bit of solvent on there. Same idea. I'm gonna run this down. Now this rod is beautiful. There we go. It actually has a nice ball bearing in the end, so this rod spins with the rifling with ease and really minimizes the potential to damage the actual rifling. And again, going with the simple brush, you can already hear that this is seemingly fairly clean. I mean, just going real slow. There we go. Getting a real quick peek in there. Looking real good so far. And at this point, honestly, just polishing up will probably be enough. Which the way I do that is now with CLP. So I'm going to take the CLP, a couple spritz in there, let it all run down. It'll go all the way down the barrel. One more spritz. There we go. Again, just going to let that sit for a minute. Now while that's doing that, perfect time to clean up on the outside. So this isn't terribly dirty, so I just really will use the CLP on all of this. Get a nice coating, just enough to protect everything. Now this is not part of my project, so this will get set aside and wait for reassembly. But again, I just kind of use some of these semi-spent patches just to move material around, move around some of the CLP, spread it out. This isn't how it's finished. It's just going to be enough to kind of move this stuff around, and then I'll transition to clean patches, perfectly clean patches by the end of it. I kind of get the economy of not wasting stuff, which is nice. Everything starts out just a little bit kind of oily, but again, by the end of this, I wipe all of it down and get it to a reasonable light coating, which is awesome. So this should go about exactly as I hope. So now I have a 9mm battle rope, or in other words, a bore snake, which is how I kind of fine tune this. So we'll run this through. I love this method. I think these are fantastic, and it really polishes up the inside. I would say with minimal potential for damage, as long as you're using the right size bore snake. So here, just going to get everything nicely aligned. And as we pull it through, just getting everything seated right. And here we go. Boom. And yeah, that is a thing of beauty. You are probably not going to see at all how perfectly polished that is, but that barrel is sweet. So that's good to go. And so now with the barrel completely cleaned up, I actually am able to identify some areas where it seems like I am getting some rubbing. Maybe from, I don't know, the screws in the M-lock or something. I'm not too sure, but I mean, not a huge deal, but definitely rubbing here, which I guess if you're looking, you know, down the barrel is roughly 3 o'clock. It seems a little funny to me, but anyway, nicely cleaned up. And at this point, this is ready to get set aside. Inside the receiver, definitely grody. So again, I'm gonna blow this out with some compressed air. Then I'm going to get my solvent on the inside. I'm basically going to brush it out with my nylon brush, just gently wipe it all out with the patches, and then get a full coat of CLP over the entire thing. Wipe it clean, get in the crevices with Q-tips and all that good stuff. Get down inside with my nylon, you know, kind of crevice tool with the patch and just clean everything out really well. And that should be about it for the receiver. All right, so sprayed it with the solvent. At this point, been kind of working at it with the bristle brush. But let's take a look. Again, remember, 500 rounds. Let's see what this looks like. So swabbing right down the middle on the inside. Pretty black, quite black. Not crazy bad, but just shows how quickly this stuff accumulates. And all that just so worthy of cleaning out of there. So 500 rounds is not a lot. In fact, that for some people is just a real good day at the range. But for me, that was 5 100 round sessions. So I got a good number of days out of this, and at this point that's why I'm cleaning it up. All right, so now pretty good. I mean, got things pretty well coated in the CLP and then wiped it all off. You can see inside now. There you can see where some of the rub areas are. So of course the coating now is sort of removed. And before I put this back together, I will put in any one of those sort of bare metal areas just the lightest coat of grease, just a little bit, and enough to kind of protect that. Not a ton, because that will just attract more dirt and grime and, you know, my unspent gunpowder, I guess, but just enough to help with friction. So anyway, that is getting set aside. Again, this is not really going to be part of my next project. Rather, this will get set aside. The bolt group here, I will do in 2 pieces. So just going to clean this up. Again, this looks to be pretty dirty, pretty grimy. And then I'm not going to take this entire thing apart. This whole thing can completely come apart. But I am probably not going to do that, and then I'll just be careful and clean everything up on the exterior. Again, just going to use a little bit of the, I think I'm just going to use CLP for this, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'll start with a solvent. That formula does seem to work very well for me. So again, we'll go with the solvent here just to get things broken up, and then we'll go back to the CLP. So I'm just going to be a little mindful of exactly where I spray, and I'll touch things up on the front by hand. Again, just using the nylon brush to kind of get things scrubbed a little bit and moving, freed up. especially on some of the metal parts that don't have shiny finish. This works actually very well. You'll see how dirty things are here. Look at how just grimy this is. This is disgusting. So this really needs a good cleaning. I also think if you're not careful, you're gonna drive, liquid grime deeper into this group here. So just gotta be a little bit careful. So grime on this was very substantial. I'm not gonna say next level, but man, was this thing dirty. So cleaned up pretty well with the solvent. At this point, just gonna go CLP, light coating. I'll work it around, get everything smoothed out and polished off, and this should be pretty good. Now, in terms of wear points, I see a little bit in a few strategic locations, so we'll pay attention to that. I definitely think that I want to get lubricant into all these little crevices and some of the tight areas, but again, not too much, just enough to coat and protect everything. Too much and this is going to attract grime, but at the same time, protecting this is key. Lubrication, protection, and this is actually looking pretty good. So areas for grease, I can't really say, to be honest with you. It doesn't really look like there are too many areas that would need it, but sometimes if I can just identify what the wear points are going to be, those will be the places for just a little bit grease. But you'll see what I'm doing here with this patch. Just running all the edges and the grooves. I did this with the solvent to really get all the corners and edges of everything super clean. And then I also run everything with cotton swabs, really in all the tight spots, in all the little bolt holes. Just get everything back to about as perfect as I can. So now that I've kind of run the CLP over this, again, I'm going to go back with fairly clean patches and just touch it all up. So you'll see that's kind of my rough coating there. And no matter what I do, I'm still stirring up just grime and foulings. There's no real way around this right now, but it is much, 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 much better than it was. So at this point, I would say this is looking pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty darn good, especially considering where it started. Now I've cleaned up the Ruger magwell, and it's crazy how dirty this thing is. And in fact, I've cleaned it, I thought, pretty well, and every turn of the corner, it's just more grime and lots of little like nooks and crannies. So this thing is kind of a pain in the neck to clean and get it right. A little spring here, got to be careful. A couple little plastic doodads, some grooves and holes, and I don't know. This is just so dirty, but worth taking the time and cleaning it up while we're here. Again, I might go to the Glock magwell after all, but at least this is clean, so we'll see. And last but not least, the trigger assembly, which can be fully disassembled, but I am absolutely not going to do that. In fact, I'm literally just going to like wipe off a little bit. I can see some of that spent gunpowder. If I was smart, I would blow this thing out, but we'll see. Maybe just do it with my breath. So cleaning this up should not be too big of a deal. It is grody, but again, with only 500 rounds through here, like, this is only supposed to be sort of like a surface cleaning anyway. I'm not really deep cleaning this firearm. Now, I can certainly go red is dead, pull the trigger, release the hammer, and at this point, I can kind of get in here. That's going to allow me to get a couple of different additional areas, but pretty straightforward. This is very much like a Ruger 1022, where you end up with that spring and nests into the back there. It's really just a matter of getting everything properly aligned, and that will go right back into place. So again, so we'll lock that so I can't accidentally release it, and just continuing to kind of poke at this with some cotton swabs and getting the bulk of the grime out of it. But again, doesn't need a lot, just enough to kind of clean things up. Quick little surface wipe down, and this will be good. So with that, I think I am done. And so at this point, my Ruger PC Carbine is fully disassembled and in a box. And my future project will be very, very cool. I'm excited for it. So again, this was basically just to get everything clean, fully cleaned up, all the gunk and grime now gone. I'm pumped about that. It's not lubed up. I'm gonna do all the lubing and all that stuff as I reassemble, but not until after my project. And the main thing is, well, at this point, you can see the original sort of factory setup here was in black. And well, next time we see this, it is certainly going to look quite different. So again, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for following along. Basic disassembly, again, more like a field strip, not going all the way into full detail, and then a general cleaning. And I'm happy with how clean everything really is. So again, thank you guys for following along. If you like that content, do me a favor, take a look at my Outer Limitless channel, which is more my primary gear. On that channel, I cover everything from hiking, camping, and backpacking excursions, all the gear that goes with it. So from sleep systems, shelter systems, knives, axes, backpacks, flashlights, you name it. That's my Outer Limitless YouTube channel. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.